Alrighty, once again, welcoming back David Stodder for his next appearance on Speaking of Data. Always a pleasure to talk with you, Dave. Dave, of course, is the Senior Director for Research here at TDWI for Business Intelligence. And the topic of today is kind of exciting. Dave is authoring a best practices report coming out shortly here on achieving scalable, agile, and comprehensive data management and governance. And that's obviously going to be the topic of our conversation today. But before we dive in, how are you doing, Dave?
Good. Yeah, summer's going well. Hope everyone is having a good summer. You too, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, things are going well.
Yeah, definitely. I think we just had a close of our TDWI San Diego conference that went really well, and I know you were a part of that. So busy time for all of us here. But okay, I'm looking forward to hearing about this best practices report here. So I'm going to kick it off, Dave, and ask, I think, a very obvious question, but what was the reason behind doing this report on this topic, compiling the research? What drove you to this?
Well, I mean, you think about scalable, agile, comprehensive data management and governance. I mean, that's like the core topics of TDWI. I mean, there couldn't be anything more central than that. And so definitely was, aiming for, I guess you could say, the direct middle of TDWI interest in this. So hopefully there's a lot in there that will be helpful to people in trying to sort out their strategy around data governance and data management. And of course, we actually covered data integration in there too, and because you can't really talk about the others without discussing integration topics. And so, but some of the top line things, I mean, the data explosion is continuing across distributed landscapes. So we talk a lot in the report about distributed landscapes and how to deal with that. So you got data on premises, data in multiple clouds, data silos. I mean, these are the kind of things that are a complex situation in organizations tends to kind of just evolve that way in most cases. It builds that way in sort of a piecemeal fashion, or organizations, have mergers and acquisitions or start up new subsidiaries. And then I think in the self-service era, it's much easier, and self-service and cloud, I should say, for departmental users to set up reports set up data platforms and things like that to support things like reports and analytics. And so, distributed is kind of the way it is. And so it's a major concern. And so organizations, they're looking at the potential of this data. They want to use it for data monetization, to just improve data management practices. They're now driving data applications that are really data-rich applications with lots of analytics in them. And so kind of need to pull it all together and get a holistic view of how it's all supposed to come together, and hopefully, and then how to save costs, to reduce redundancy, improve data quality. So all that kind of stuff is discussed in the reports, or how to balance, having stability and flexibility. You need flexibility to keep pace with business demand, unanticipated events, but then, of course, need to be able to govern it and be able to align investments with business requirements, so that you're not doing things that aren't really producing value. And it just turns out that legacy technologies and platforms are not helpful. I mean, well, I shouldn't say totally unhelpful, but they're not keeping pace. And it's a big effort to keep pace. And so we're seeing a lot of change. And one of the things that, AI, I mean, we'd probably be talking about AI a lot in this podcast and certainly in the report. But AI-infused automation is something that's entering into data management, data governance, and data integration. So we talk about all that, and aim at improving things like data preparation processes, data transformation, to make all those things kind of go faster and be more accurate. So there's a lot of interesting technologies coming into the fold. So hopefully that's not too many words there, but there's a lot to talk about.
No, I think that's a great baseline for the report.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add in there, something I should have mentioned at the top is you can, of course, explore this report a lot further and download it, read it all. If you go to our website, tdwi.org, it'll be under our research and resources tab. I encourage all of you listening, tuning in to go ahead and do that. I think you'll find a wealth of information within that report. But let's get into some of that so we can kind of preview what people can expect. As you just outlined, there is a lot to cover. So overall, Dave, how successful are organizations currently in managing and governing their data, especially as you mentioned, to support things like AI and ML?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the answer we came up with is really, it depends, So, some organizations are more successful, some are less. And then we found there's inconsistency in organizations. Just to quote a little bit of research, we found that 38%, so they have isolated areas of success and agility, but the capabilities are uneven. So I think, that speaks to it, that some departments maybe are doing well, maybe with a limited set of things that they're trying to accomplish, but then as they try to expand into other things, then they face challenges. Or other organizations we found, are just getting started with serious data management, data governance. Maybe they're even coming off of spreadsheet use and that piecemeal kind of growth that I was talking about, and suddenly are facing data governance and data management issues is out of control in terms of costs. They can't keep track of sensitive data. And so 14% saying only 14% saying that they're highly successful and that they're feeling good about handling change, but 28% saying that they're okay with what they're doing currently, but they're really not so sure about the future, and that they're seeing challenges ahead that are going to be difficult. And in terms of AI and machine learning, let's see, we did see, again, sort of piecemeal growth is something that's pretty common in organizations and contributes to that sort of uneven and sort of not sure whether we've really got it under control and concerned about the future. And here we see just a few research points: reducing time and costs associated with data collection and preparation for analytics and AI machine learning development. It's a high priority. 43% saying that this is, one of their top priorities is sort of get their arms around this and reduce costs and make it more streamlined. Increasing data availability, pardon the frog in my throat, for AI and machine learning development, training, and testing. That's 40% looking at trying to improve that. So we definitely see a big appetite for using technology and improving processes to make improvements. And I think it's a major focus in organizations. And talking about governance, data governance is fairly well known, but we're seeing a lot of growth and interest in AI model governance. So trying to extend the idea of, extend data governance into what you're doing with models for testing, even feature selection, things like that. But then being able to govern the models to look out for things like accuracy, improved accuracy, data drift, performance. And so 30% were saying that this is actually a top priority in their organizations too. So we're sort of seeing that data governance and AI model governance kind of, a lot of organizations are not together. It's still that sort of fragmented, but I think over time we're going to see it come together because there's obviously a lot of shared practices and concerns.
Yeah, so as you mentioned there, Dave, data governance is a major focus as organizations face pressures to protect sensitive data, right? Mm-hmm. The PII, customer personal identifiable information. And then they also work to improve trust in data quality, completeness, and accuracy. So then within the report, what are you finding about the status of data governance?
Well, like I said, I think it's sort of uneven. There's better performance, I'd say, in data governance around protecting sensitive data. And that makes sense because, there are legal reasons why organizations have to do that. They can get a lot of trouble and cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so in many organizations, the lawyers come down and they say, you got to get this under control because we're vulnerable. And so what organizations don't want to do is just shut things down. Like I've talked to organizations where they may have been doing more adventurous marketing, say with customer behavior data, things like that. And the management comes in and says, we got to stop because we just don't have this under control. We can't do this anymore. And of course, the cost of that is that you're losing a competitive advantage that you may have. And so that's a dangerous proposition in itself. So so I think that there's more on that, but data quality, in some ways, it just never goes away because there's always new data, more complex data. So organizations are just in this forever kind of mission to try to get a handle on data quality, completeness, and accuracy. And but there's some interesting things that are going on that I think are improving it. Like in some ways, the migration to the cloud. I mean, traditionally, IT has been kind of separate from the business, but cloud is beginning to make it so that business is driving, or had been really driving, the move to the cloud. I think IT's behind it as well. And that is tending to sort of bridge the gaps between IT and business so that they're sort of more on the same page about how they're expanding these systems. And then they can bring in or maybe establish committees, governance committees to guide that with IT and business stakeholders, which is a really good development, and begin to deal with some of these issues right at the beginning, sometimes based on difficult experiences that they've had, to try to improve how business and IT are working together to improve governance, both what we're kind of calling the defensive data governance, which is about protecting sensitive data, and then offensive data governance, which is about improving trust and data quality, the completeness and accuracy. And so let's see, just a few areas that are kind of interesting to point out in the research. We found that organizations, how successful are they meeting regulatory and compliance objectives? Well, 30% say that they're very successful, and 43% are somewhat successful, but so that adds up to 73% leaning on the successful side. So that's pretty good. And then there's some other areas, like we asked about behavioral data, customer behavior data, whether they're able to govern the data that they're looking at, in terms of customers' historical and real-time data. They want to be able to respond to offers, but also protect the data, protect PII and all that. And so 28% say they're very successful, and 43% they're somewhat successful, which is still also pretty high numbers. In financial budgeting, planning, and forecasting, organizations again are reasonably satisfied with their data management and government for these activities. 22% saying that they're very successful, 44% saying somewhat successful. And there's a real emphasis on, can you trust the data? Is it accurate data? I mean, we're talking about finance here, so it's got to be accurate. The snapshots have got to be accurate. Forecasting decisions are going to be made on this, and so again, an emphasis there we see in organizations. Although agility is very important, though, because competitive organizations want to be able to change their forecasts depending on as conditions change, and so be able to update those, be able to update budgets, and so forth. So that's become a stress in organizations in terms of finances, be able to work with agility. Some of the areas where they're less successful is automated decisions and embedded analytics. I mean, these are sort of new areas, and building that into applications. So here we see that 22% say they're somewhat unsuccessful, and 14% say they're not at all successful. So that adds up to 36% saying they're just not successful with that. And then growth in AI machine learning, 43% saying that the organizations are successful in the development, testing, and deploying of analytics, but the governance is a major issue they have to deal with, and a modernization driver. They're trying to come up with more automated, more AI-infused ability to maybe putting constraints around governance in the AI machine learning, kind of the whole process of developing those systems, so that it isn't a situation where you got your developers, data scientists, data engineers constantly having to, maybe even pick up just a rule book. Like, what are the rules? It's better if it can be just embedded into the systems. So a lot going on, I think, in that governance area. Sometimes it can seem like is it really that exciting to talk about data governance? Well, actually, I mean, there's so much at stake, and there's actually a lot of new technology coming in. So it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting. It continues to be interesting, and I think will be all much more encompassing too. I mean, there's just so many things happening on this side of the world, and I got a couple more questions for you, obviously, but the first one that I'd like to get to here is, in the report, there's some in-depth discussions of issues in data management, and I know you probably touched on one or two here, but can you maybe expand and talk a little bit about some of the top challenges that those companies are facing?
Sure. I mentioned distributed data, and so that did rise up there. Distributed data across data silos, and so fragmentation of data is 41% citing the data silos are one of their top three challenges. As I mentioned, the silo creation kind of in some ways goes along with data democratization, which is a good thing in organizations, but need to be able to manage it and have a good balance between self-service and things like data governance. And so this is where it gets in also into the data integration area. So we do spend a fair amount of time in the report talking about data virtualization, data fabrics, data mesh. I mean, things that can be done to accelerate, streamline the ability of users to access the data, to have confidence in the data, because a lot of all three of those areas are the catalog and sort of metadata and knowledge about the data is very much in the center of architectures for data fabrics, data mesh, and data virtualization. And so that's kind of an interesting area coming together. We do see, 1/3 or actually, but 32% are currently using a data virtualization layer. So that's to be able to access data without a lot of data movement. 38% are planning to use one. So, and this shows growth over the last few years. We've been doing the survey question. And so, we're seeing growth in those areas. And so that's distributed, but then we also see growth in the idea of unifying, so we've been talking a lot at TDWI about unified data platforms, such as a data lakehouse. And so we talk about that in the report. And so that's where you're trying to bring in the best of data warehousing and data lakes into one platform. We do see 22% are currently using a unified data warehouse and data lake, maybe call it a data lakehouse, whatever you want to call it. 46% planning to use one, which is actually the highest plan to use percentage in the figure that we have about all these different technologies. Reducing data movement, replication, copying is an important objective. 34% saying this is one of their top 3 objectives. So that, again, shows that tends to be slow and costly in organizations, and there's technologies devoted to making it faster and making it more self-service to be able to load data faster. And that's very important. But I think some organizations, where it works, are looking for alternatives there. And then I mentioned, data catalogs. That's another big area in organizations we see. Again, numbers going up every year. And I mentioned it's central to the distributed architectures. And so that I think is a pretty good summary of a lot of things. There's, as you mentioned, Andrew, there's a lot in the report. I think when we're all said and done, it could be 50 pages. So it's a fairly long report. Yeah.
Well, no, but I think all those challenges are very much top of mind for folks. And so, a follow-up question I have here, Dave, is you mentioned AI, and I believe AI and generative AI are covered in your report, a decent amount. But I feel like there might be an opportunity here for companies to utilize generative AI as a tool for them to potentially help govern, and manage this data. Is that right? I know that they're probably using AI already and they need to govern that, but is there an opportunity for them to use generative AI here to help on this side?
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, generative AI, thinking of it as sort of part of the basket of technologies for AI and machine learning, it'll be one that will be used. I think, particularly for semi-structured and unstructured kind of data. It could prove to be very useful to understand, how data is being shared both inside and outside the organization, to be able to track that faster. Data lineage, for example, is something that is built into data catalogs, but some areas we're collecting that data lineage, particularly along really complex cycles of data, collection in the ingestion cycles and then transformation. What's really happened to this data? I think that it's very possible that kind of technology could be valuable.
Okay, so I got one last question for you, Dave, before I let you go here. It is a best practices report by name, and so I think it would be wise for us to mention some of these best practices that you might be recommending in this report. So what recommendations can you list for us? I know there's quite a few, but maybe some of the best ones.
Yeah, I'll just come up with some, because we do have 10 in the report, and definitely the best practices. Try to kind of filter it in through the discussion, but we come to the end of the report, in all of our best practices report, kind of sum it up and offer recommendations. And so I've got 10, and I probably shouldn't go through all 10 because it would take too long. But let's see if I can do the top line ones. Harness modern technologies and practices to improve data quality. It's easy to kind of sleep on that issue, but the reality is there's a reason why it's at the top of the list in terms of priorities. As I mentioned, it's sort of a moving target. It's something that's kind of never really solved, but it does take a lot of manual work and a lot of attention from various stakeholders and data engineers, data analysts, business analysts, and others on the business side. And so the more that can be automated, AI infused, the better. So I think that's one. Definitely want to enhance the data management and governance agility, because there's always change in organizations. It's another one of those things that once you think you've got everything kind of nailed down, it changes. I mean, we certainly know that from the last few years. And so want to check into that. We do spend time in the report talking about analytics and AI machine learning pain points. And so our research uncovers a few of those. And I think it kind of will help organizations orient their thinking around where they need to modernize to augment analytics, including now, as you mentioned, generative AI coming on fast. And so trying to figure out how to reduce time and costs, not blow the budget and send things into, chaos that way. So that's important. And then, one other thing I'd like to mention, data stewardship, because this plays a role in data governance, improving data quality, and even in data integration, to be able to have data stewards who are experts in the data. I'm starting to see organizations actually have, that's your title, a data steward, but a lot of organizations, they have day jobs doing something else. And so it's kind of difficult for them to cut out the time to be data stewards, to be that expert in the data, be the expert in the governance rules and policies, and be able to mentor particularly new users to use them effectively, or use them correctly, I should say. So again, things that can be done to automate what a data steward has to do, so that they have tools, can be very valuable. And as I mentioned, data catalogs, being able to use as kind of central or shared resources that have all the knowledge about the data. As I mentioned, we've seen growth in that again for both the offensive and defensive data governance, but also in data integration. And I could just go on and on. Maybe the last one I'll mention is just about self-service. And we did see a lot of interest still in self-service, particularly around data integration, transformation, and pipeline development. So this is an area where organizations can really help out the range of users. I mean, data scientists, data engineers, to analysts, to be more productive in working with data and have good self-service capabilities, but then also be able to balance that with effective governance.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Those are all great recommendations, and I'm glad that you held off from reading the rest, because we do want people to go ahead and check it out for themselves. As I did mention, please go to tdwi.org, download this best practices report. Dave, thank you for all your effort and energy and time putting this best practices report together. It's always a fantastic report every time you get to author one. I know you do one at least every year, so a lot of people are always looking forward to that, including myself. But really appreciate your time today here as well. And I will let you go. But anything else that you wanted to mention before we say goodbye?
Just we're at TW, we're always very excited when we publish our best practices report. My colleagues Fern and Jim Kobilis, and we do put a lot into it, but we really thank the community, because I know we put the survey out there, and the TWI community spent a lot of time filling out the surveys, and we really appreciate it. It's incredibly valuable to be able to pull this together and then report it back to the community, hopefully to help with strategic decisions about data. And great talking to you, Andrew, about all this stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Dave. Always a pleasure. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.